Watch where you stand, you clumsy fool. My sister said that at her own baby shower, loud enough for every guest to hear, right after she stepped directly into my path at the top of 3 stairs and watched me fall. My mother didn't put her teacup down. She looked at me over the rim and said, "Always making a scene to steal attention." I got up, brushed the dust off both knees, and walked out the front door without a single word. What no one in that room knew was that the catering deposit, every dollar of it, had run through my account 6 weeks earlier. And by 2 p.m., when my sister reached for that card to settle the final balance in front of her guests, it was already gone. The caterers packed up mid-setup. The dessert table never came together, and my mother had to stand in that living room and explain to 40 people why there was no food. 7 of them left without saying goodbye. 3 haven't spoken to my sister since. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now let me take you back to the night before that shower and what I found in my sister's messages that told me exactly what she was planning to do. The night before the shower, the house smelled like expensive lilies and floor wax. My mother was in full command mode, pacing the living room with a clipboard in one hand and a glass of Chardonnay in the other. I was on my hands and knees, taping down the edges of a cream-colored silk runner that she insisted had to be perfectly flush with the hardwood. My sister, Chloe, was sprawled on the sofa, scrolling through her phone and occasionally pointing out a spot I'd missed. "Make sure that's straight, Alina," my mother said, not looking down from her list. "We have the prestigious guests coming tomorrow. The Mitchells, the Sanborns. Everything has to look like it cost a fortune because it did." I pulled the tape tight, my lower back throbbing. I'd been there since 5 p.m. I'd moved the heavy oak dining table into the sunroom by myself. I'd unpacked 3 crates of crystal glassware. I'd even scrubbed the baseboards in the guest bathroom because my mother claimed she could see a film of failure on them. That was the family law. Chloe provided the milestones, and I provided the labor and the capital. I'm 32, single, and I work 60 hours a week as a senior analyst. Because I don't have a husband or a growing belly, as my mother puts it, my time and my money are considered community property. The catering deposit was $6,000, my mother said, finally looking at me. "I assume you moved that into the secondary account. The final balance is due tomorrow at the event." "It's another $8,000. $8,000, I stopped taping and looked up. The original quote was 5. Why is the final balance more than the deposit? My mother waved her hand dismissively. Chloe wanted the artisanal oyster bar and the imported macarons. It's her first baby, Alina. Don't be petty. You have that extra cushion from your bonus. It's your duty as an aunt to make sure this child enters a world of beauty. I looked at Chloe. She didn't even look up from her screen. She just smirked and adjusted a throw pillow with her foot. It's not an extra cushion, I said quietly. It's my savings for a down payment. You live in a perfectly fine apartment, my mother snapped. You don't need a house, you're one person. Chloe needs a nursery, she needs a legacy. Now stop counting pennies and finish the runner. I went back to the floor. My knees were sore against the wood. This was the pattern. I was the designated ATM. I paid for the Christmas cruise 3 years ago. I paid for the emergency repairs on my parents' roof that turned out to be a luxury deck installation. Every time I tried to say no, the guilt was applied like a blunt instrument. I was told I was selfish. I was told I was cold. I was told I didn't understand the sanctity of family because I hadn't started one of my own. I looked toward the den. My father was sitting in his leather recliner, the flickering blue light of a golf tournament reflecting off his glasses. He'd been there for 3 hours. He hadn't lifted a finger to help with the furniture or the boxes. I walked into the den and stood by his chair. "Dad, the catering bill is out of control. It's $14,000 total. That's nearly half of what I've saved this year." He didn't move his eyes from the TV. He just reached out and patted my hand in a way that felt more like a dismissal than a comfort. "Just write the check, Ellie. Keep your mother's blood pressure down. You know how she gets when things aren't perfect. It's just money. We'll make it up to you later." "When is later, Dad?" "Later," he repeated, his voice trailing off as a golfer made a putt. "Just keep the peace." That was his only contribution to the family dynamic, keep the peace, which really meant, let your sister and mother bleed you dry so I don't have to listen to them scream. I walked back into the living room. Chloe was laughing at something on her iPad now. My mother was rearranging a vase of flowers I'd spent 20 minutes positioning. I felt that familiar weight in my chest, the one that tells you that you are a secondary character in your own life. I was 32 years old and I was being treated like a hired servant who also happened to be the primary investor. "I'll move the funds," I said. My mother didn't even say thank you. She just pointed to a stack of party favor boxes in the hallway. "Good. Now get those assembled." "They need the silk ribbons tied in a double loop, not the single loop you did last time. It looked cheap." I picked up the first box. I sat on the floor in the hallway, away from the light of the living room, and started tying ribbons. I did it because it was easier than the alternative. I did it because I had been trained to believe that my worth was tied to my utility. I stayed until midnight. I tied 150 ribbons. I polished the silverware. I hauled the trash out to the curb. When I finally grabbed my coat to leave, my mother was already upstairs. Chloe had gone to bed hours ago. My father was asleep in his chair, the TV still murmuring about yardage and wind speeds. No one said goodnight. No one asked if I was tired. I drove home in the dark, my hands smelling like silk and silver polish. I told myself it was just one more day. I told myself that once the shower was over, I could go back to my quiet life and start rebuilding the hole they'd dug in my bank account. I didn't know then that the hole was about to get much, much deeper. And I didn't know that the people I was killing myself to please were currently upstairs, laughing about how they were going to break me. The next morning, the first undeniable cost came in the form of a phone call from my boss, Sarah. I was in the kitchen of my parents' house, hidden behind a stack of rental chairs, trying to swallow a piece of burnt toast while my mother barked orders at the florist in the next room. "Elena," Sarah said, her voice dropping that professional warmth she usually has. "I'm looking at the quarterly projections you were supposed to finalize last night. They aren't in the shared drive." I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my spine. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had a family emergency." "I'm at my parents' house. I'll have them to you by noon." "Noon isn't going to work," Sarah said flatly. "The board meeting is at 10. Elena, you've missed 3 deadlines this month. Every time it's family. I value you, but I can't run a department on your sister's schedule. If those aren't in by the time I walk into that boardroom, we're going to have a very different conversation on Monday." She hung up. I stood there, staring at the screen of my phone. That was the first time my work life, the only thing I actually owned, started to fray. I had spent so much time being the family's safety net that I was letting my own safety net snap. I looked at my laptop, sitting on the granite island, covered in a light dusting of powdered sugar from the pastries my mother was plate testing. I needed 2 hours, just 2 hours of silence to finish the data modeling. I reached for the laptop, but my mother's hand slammed down on the lid. "Not now, Elena," she hissed. "The balloon arch team is here and they're saying the ceiling hooks won't hold the weight. You need to go out to the garage, find the heavy-duty command strips, and show them where the studs are. I am not having a collapsed arch over the gift table." "Mom, I'm about to lose my lead on the Q3 project," I said, my voice shaking. "I need 1 hour, please, just 1 hour." She didn't even blink. We all have jobs, Alina. My job today is making sure Chloe feels loved. Your job is to support us. Don't be so dramatic, it's just a spreadsheet. Now the garage, go, I went. I spent 45 minutes on a stepladder in the garage, digging through boxes of Christmas decorations and old lawn equipment to find a specific brand of adhesive. My hands were covered in cobwebs and grease. My phone buzzed in my pocket, another email from Sarah. Then a text from a colleague asking where I was. I felt the walls closing in. The extra money they thought I had was only there because I worked like a dog. If I lost this job, the ATM would be empty. But they didn't care about the source, they only cared about the output. I finally found the strips and brought them in. As I walked through the kitchen, I saw Chloe. She was sitting at the table, freshly showered, wearing a silk robe that I had bought her for her birthday. She was eating a bowl of organic berries that I had driven 40 minutes to find at a specialty market the night before. "You look like a mess, Elle," she said, popping a blackberry into her mouth. "You've got a smudge on your forehead. Try to clean up before the guests get here. You're embarrassing the aesthetic." I didn't say anything. I just handed the adhesive to the balloon guy. 10 minutes later, I retreated to the kitchen to grab a damp paper towel for my face. That's when I saw it. Chloe had left her iPad unlocked on the counter. It was propped up against a vase of lilies, the screen bright and inviting. I shouldn't have looked. But I was tired, I was losing my standing at work, and I was being treated like a second-class citizen in the house I grew up in. The notification was from a group chat titled Baby Shower Besties. Chloe, Alina is being such a martyr today, literally sighing every time mom asks her to do something. Bridesmaid Jen, she's just jealous, lol. Typical single sister energy. Chloe, wait for the grand entrance though. I have a plan to humble her. You know those 3 steps into the dining room? I'm going to accidentally clip her when she's carrying the punch bowl. Make the clumsy idiot look stupid in front of everyone. Mom says she'll back me up and tell everyone Alina was just trying to steal the spotlight again. Bridesmaid Jen, LMAO, please tell me someone is filming it. Chloe, I'll make sure the photographer is positioned right. It'll be the highlight of the afternoon. I stood frozen. The paper towel in my hand was dripping cold water onto my shoes. I wasn't just the laborer. I wasn't just the bank. I was the entertainment. They were planning to physically shove me down a set of stairs in front of 40 people just to have a laugh at my expense. And my mother wasn't just aware of it. She was helping write the script for the aftermath. I looked at the catering invoice sitting next to the iPad. Final balance, $8,400.00. Payment method, card on file ending in 4492. My card. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I was paying $8,000 for the privilege of being assaulted in a room full of my peers. I was funding my own public humiliation. I looked at the berries Chloe was eating. I looked at the silk runner I'd taped down until my fingers bled. I looked at my phone, where a final message from Sarah popped up. Don't bother with the noon deadline. We'll talk Monday morning. Bring your laptop and your badge. The damage was real. My career was on the line, my dignity was a joke, and my bank account was being harvested by people who didn't even view me as human. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I picked up my laptop, walked into the guest bathroom, and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub and opened my banking app. I didn't look at the savings account. I looked at the checking account, the one the caterers were authorized to hit at 2 p.m. That was the moment the world shifted. I realized that the only reason they could treat me like this was because I kept saying yes with my wallet. I stayed in that bathroom for a long time. Outside, I could hear the sounds of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and my mother's voice calling my name, demanding to know where the extra napkins were. I ignored her. For the first time in my life, I just sat in the quiet and watched the numbers on my screen. That was the first lie I stopped telling myself, the lie that if I just did enough, they would finally love me. I sat on the edge of the guest bathroom tub, staring at the screen of my phone until the light timed out. Then I tapped it again. I opened my banking app. $8,400. That was the exact amount sitting in my checking account, waiting for the caterer's transaction at 2 p.m. It was almost poetic. It was the exact price of my own dignity. I could hear the party starting through the vents, the high-pitched trill of my mother's hostess voice, the heavy thud of the caterers moving the silver warming trays into the dining room. I knew exactly what was happening out there. Chloe was probably holding court in the sunroom, accepting gifts for a child she intended to raise with the same entitlement she used to bleed me dry. My stomach turned when I thought about those messages. Make the clumsy idiot look stupid. I wasn't just paying for the food. I was paying for the stage, the lighting, and the props for my own assault. If I stayed on this path, I was essentially handing my sister a baton and asking her to hit me with it. I looked at the Move Funds button. It felt heavy. In our family, money was the only thing that actually spoke. My mother didn't value my time or my career, but she valued the things my money bought. If I took the money away, I wasn't just being difficult. I was removing the foundation of the house they'd built on my back. I thought about my boss, Sarah. I thought about the board meeting happening right now, the one I was missing because I was busy finding heavy-duty command strips for a balloon arch. I was sacrificing my future for a family that viewed me as a prop. I hit transfer. I moved every single cent into my high-yield savings account, an account that was not linked to the debit card the caterer had on file. I watched the checking balance drop. $0.00. It looked clean. It looked honest. I stood up and caught my reflection in the mirror. My face was smudged with dust from the garage. My hair was messy. I looked like the person they wanted me to be, the frazzled, unreliable sister who couldn't even keep herself together at a party. I washed my face. I straightened my shirt. I didn't feel the panic I expected to feel. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. I walked out of the bathroom and back into the kitchen. The caterer, a tall man named Marcus, was checking his watch. He saw me and nodded. "We're almost ready to go live with the buffet," Marcus said. "Just a reminder, we'll be processing the final balance on the card ending in 4492 at exactly 2 p.m. That's per the contract for day of settlement." "I understand," I said. My voice was steady. "The card is on file. It'll be ready." He smiled and went back to arranging the artisanal oyster bar. That oyster bar alone cost more than my first car. It was sitting on ice, waiting for guests who would never know I had spent 3 months of my life earning the money to pay for it. I walked into the living room. My mother was showing off the floral centerpieces to her friend, Mrs. Sanborn. "Elena did the labor, of course," my mother said, barely glancing at me. "But I did the design. Elena doesn't really have an eye for these things. She's more analytical, practical, like a bookkeeper." Mrs. Sanborn smiled at me, but it was a pitying smile. "It must be nice to have so much free time to help your sister, Elena. Being single does have its perks, doesn't it?" "I'm sure," I said. I looked across the room and saw Chloe. She was whispering to bridesmaid Jen, the one from the group chat. They both looked at me and then looked at the 3 stairs leading down into the dining area. Chloe winked. That was the confirmation. It wasn't just a joke they'd made in a chat, it was an active plan. They were tracking my movements. They were waiting for the punch bowl moment. I checked the time. 1:15 p.m. The leverage was set. The trap was laid. But for the first time in 32 years, I wasn't the one who was going to be caught in it. I walked over to the beverage station. I picked up a glass of sparkling water and took a sip. My father walked past me, heading for the bar. "Everything's looking good, Ellie," he muttered. "Mom's happy, Chloe's happy. You did a good job, just stay out of the way now and let them have their moment. I'll do that, Dad, I said. I'll stay right out of the way. I watched him go. He had no idea that the peace he valued so much was about to evaporate. He had spent his life letting my mother and sister consume me so he could have a quiet house. He was about to find out how loud a house gets when the person holding the walls up finally walks away. I looked at the guests. 40 people. Most of them were people my mother wanted to impress, clients of my father's, neighbors with larger houses, members of the garden club. They were all here to witness the perfect family. I realized then that this wasn't just about the money. It was about the image. My mother and sister were using my labor and my funds to buy a social currency they hadn't earned, and they were going to pay me back by making me the family joke. I stood by the window and watched the minutes tick by. 1:30 p.m., 1:45 p.m. The caterers were putting the finishing touches on the dessert table. The imported macarons were stacked in a perfect pyramid. The scent of vanilla and expensive sugar filled the air. I felt a strange sense of mourning. Not for the money, I could earn more money. I was mourning the idea of a family. I was looking at these people and realizing they were strangers who happened to share my DNA. They didn't know me. They didn't want to know me. They only wanted to know what I could provide. That was the last time I felt sad. After that, I just felt ready. I saw Chloe move toward the kitchen. She was talking to the photographer, pointing toward the dining room steps. She was setting the shot. I gripped my glass of water. My hand wasn't shaking. I knew what I had to do. I had to play the part of the clumsy fool one last time. I had to let them think they'd won right up until the moment the floor dropped out from under them. I checked my phone. 1 minute until 2 p.m. I looked at the dining room steps. I looked at the card on file. The game was about to change. By the time the clock struck 2 p.m., the spillover into my other life was complete. I checked my phone under the counter. A formal calendar invite had appeared. Disciplinary review Monday 9:00 a.m. Sarah hadn't just been warning me, she had already started the paperwork. My professional reputation, built over years of late nights and skipped vacations, was currently bleeding out on the floor of my mother's kitchen. I walked into the sunroom, where the early arriving aunts were already circling the room like sharks in floral dresses. Aunt Linda, my mother's youngest sister, caught my arm. "Elena, darling, you look exhausted," she said, her voice dripping with that false concern that passes for affection in our family. "Your mother says you've been a bit erratic lately. Is everything okay at that job of yours? It seems so stressful for someone without a support system at home." "I'm fine, Aunt Linda," I said, trying to pull away. "It's just that we're so worried about Chloe," she continued, her grip tightening. "This pregnancy has been so hard on her. It's a blessing she has you to handle the heavy lifting. Not everyone has a sister who can just drop everything and pay for a lifestyle like this." The word pay hung in the air. This was the second arena, the social narrative. My mother hadn't just taken my money. She had spent the last few weeks painting a picture of me as an unstable, struggling woman whose only path to redemption was serving her successful sister. It wasn't enough that I funded the party. They had to frame the funding as an act of penance for my supposed failures. I saw my mother across the room, nodding as Aunt Linda spoke. She was reinforcing the lie in real time. To these women, I wasn't a senior analyst at a top-tier firm. I was the clumsy, single daughter who was lucky to be invited to the table. "Elena," my mother's voice cut through the chatter. "The punch bowl is ready in the kitchen. It's the crystal one, the heirloom. Be careful. We know how you get when you're flustered." A few guests chuckled. It was the setup. The room was being primed to see me as the person who ruins things. I went into the kitchen. The punch bowl was massive, filled with a sparkling pink liquid and floating slices of citrus. It was heavy, slick with condensation, and worth more than my first month's rent. I looked at the 3 stairs leading down into the dining area. Chloe was already positioned near the top, laughing with Jen. The photographer was adjusting his lens, focusing on the threshold of the room. The plan was so transparent it was almost pathetic. I was supposed to carry this heavy, fragile bowl. Chloe would clip me, the punch would go everywhere, the bowl would shatter, and I would be the girl who ruined the baby's shower. My mother would then deliver the line about me stealing attention, and I would be cemented as the family disgrace in front of 40 influential witnesses. I looked at my phone. The caterer, Marcus, was standing by the dining room table, his tablet in hand. He was trying to run the card. I saw his face change. He frowned, tapped the screen, and tried again. Then he looked up, scanning the room for Chloe, the person who had signed the contract. I felt a surge of cold adrenaline. The spillover was happening. The financial reality was about to collide with the social fantasy. "Elena," Chloe called out, her voice sweet and poisonous. "The guests are thirsty. Bring the punch out." She moved to the very edge of the top step. She was wearing high heels, stilettos, despite being 7 months pregnant. It was a choice made for the aesthetic, even if it meant she was less stable on her feet. I picked up the punch bowl. My muscles tensed. As I walked toward the door, I didn't feel like the victim anymore. I felt like a witness. I was about to watch the 2 worlds they'd created, the one where I was a servant and the one where they were wealthy, tear each other apart. I stepped into the dining room doorway. The conversation in the main room dipped. Everyone was looking. "Careful, Elle," Chloe said, stepping directly into my path. Her hip was cocked, ready to give the accidental shove. I didn't slow down. I didn't look at her feet. I looked at Marcus, the caterer. He was walking toward us, his face pale, holding the declined receipt in his hand. The spillover was no longer just about my job or my reputation. It was about the immediate physical collapse of the lie. "Elena, look out," my mother cried, but she wasn't warning me. She was starting the performance. I felt Chloe's hip make contact with mine. It was a hard, deliberate shove, but I had already shifted my weight. I let the momentum take me, but I didn't drop the bowl. I lowered it as I fell, the pink liquid splashing onto the cream silk runner, the one I had spent 3 hours taping down. I hit the floor. The crystal bowl didn't break, but it tipped, soaking the bottom of my sister's expensive dress and the shoes of the guests standing nearby. The room went silent. "Always making a scene to steal attention," my mother said. Her voice was perfectly pitched, loud enough for the back of the room. I sat there on the floor, the cold punch seeping into my jeans. I looked up and saw the photographer's flash go off. He'd caught the fall. He'd also caught the smirk on Chloe's face before she realized the punch had ruined her outfit. "Oh, Elena," Chloe sighed, looking down at her dripping hem. "You really are hopeless." I didn't say a word. I stayed on the floor. I looked at Marcus. He had reached the group. He didn't look at me. He looked at Chloe, the woman who was supposed to be the host of this grand event. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a major problem with the final payment." The spillover had arrived. I sat on the floor, my hands resting in a puddle of pink gin and lime. The guests were staring, a sea of silk and expensive perfume. My mother was standing over me, her face a mask of practiced tragedy. "I'm so sorry, everyone," she said, her voice projecting to the corners of the room. "Elena has always struggled with these kinds of moments. She gets overwhelmed by others' happiness. It's a shame about the runner, but we'll manage." I looked up, not at her but at Marcus. He was still standing there, the paper in his hand trembling slightly. "The card is declined," Marcus repeated. He didn't say it quietly. He said it with the clinical precision of a man who needed to get paid. The room went stiller than I've ever felt it. This was the backup I hadn't expected. The the cold reality of a commercial contract. Marcus wasn't a family member I could be guilted by, he was a businessman. His presence gave me a sudden, sharp clarity. The family theater only worked if everyone followed the script. Marcus was off script. There must be a mistake, Chloe snapped. She was dabbing at her dress with a napkin, her eyes darting toward her bridesmaids. Elena, did you mess up the transfer? I told you specifically to have the funds ready by 2. I didn't answer. I didn't even stand up. I just looked at her. The transaction was attempted twice, Marcus said, looking at Chloe. Insufficient funds. The balance is $8,400. Per the agreement, we cannot serve the hot entrees or the dessert course until the balance is settled. My mother stepped forward, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Now see here, we are in the middle of an event. You can't just stop. We'll settle it tonight. I'm sorry, ma'am, Marcus said. It's a corporate policy for off-site events over $5,000. Payment on arrival or we pack up. I have a crew of $6,000 and $10,000 in inventory in that kitchen. I can't take the risk. That was the clarity. My mother and sister had spent years convincing me that I was part of the team whenever a bill was due, but a guest whenever a decision was made. Now the team was failing and they were looking at me to fix it. Elena, my father said, appearing behind my mother. He looked uncomfortable, his hands deep in his pockets. Just go into the other room and fix the banking app. You probably just moved it to the wrong sub-account. Let's not make a scene in front of the Sanborns. I finally stood up. I didn't brush off my jeans. I let the wet fabric cling to my legs. I looked at my father, the man who had spent 30 years watching me get harvested so he could have a quiet life. There is no sub-account, Dad, I said. My voice was quiet, but in that silent room it carried. The money is gone. What do you mean, gone? My mother hissed, stepping closer so the guests wouldn't hear. Where is the down payment money? You said it was there. I moved it, I said. I moved it to a private account that isn't linked to this card, and I'm not moving it back. Chloe's face went from indignant to panicked. She looked at Marcus, who was already signaling to his staff in the kitchen. Then she looked at the guests, who were beginning to whisper. I saw Mrs. Sanborn lean over to Aunt Linda and murmur something behind her hand. You can't do this, Chloe whispered. This is my day. You're ruining my baby's first memory. Your baby isn't born yet, Chloe, I said. And you weren't thinking about your baby when you planned to trip me down these stairs. You were thinking about how much your friends would laugh at the clumsy idiot. The color drained from her face. She looked at the iPad sitting on the counter, then back at me. She knew. For the first time in my life, I felt the power of the truth. It wasn't an explosion, it was just a solid wall. They could yell at me, they could shame me, they could call me names, but they couldn't make the money reappear. I was no longer the bank, and without the bank, their perfect world was just a house full of hungry, judgmental strangers. Fix this, Elena, my mother ordered, her voice trembling with rage. I am your mother. I am telling you to fix this right now. No, I said. That was the shortest sentence I'd ever said to her. It felt like a physical weight leaving my shoulders. Marcus checked his watch. I'm giving you 5 minutes to produce a valid form of payment. Otherwise, we start clearing the tables. My mother looked at my father. He looked at his shoes. They both knew they didn't have $8,000 in liquid cash. They lived on the edge of their credit limits, relying on my safety net to catch the overflow of their lifestyle. I walked over to the side table, picked up my purse, and checked my phone one last time. A new email from Sarah. Elena, I haven't heard from you. I'm assuming you're not coming in. We'll proceed with the filing. I had lost my job. I had lost my standing in the family. But as I stood in that room, watching Marcus's team start to put the lids back on the silver trays, I realized I hadn't lost anything that was actually mine. The leverage wasn't just the money. It was the fact that I finally didn't care what they thought of me. 5 minutes, Marcus said. The countdown had begun. The leverage was no longer a theory. It was the absolute silence of a room where the money had run out. I stood by the window, watching the caterers. They weren't rushing anymore. They were moving with a slow, methodical purpose that was far more terrifying than an argument. Marcus had signaled his team, and they were already capping the hot trays. The smell of the braised short ribs, the ones I had specifically worked 3 weekend shifts to afford, wafted through the room one last time before the lids clicked shut. "Elena, stop this," my mother hissed. She had moved so close I could smell the Chardonnay on her breath. "You're making a spectacle. Think of your sister's condition. Think of the stress you're putting on this family." "I am thinking about the family," I said. "I'm thinking about how the clumsy idiot is the only one who actually brings anything to the table, and today the table is closed." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't open the banking app this time. I opened the screenshots I'd taken of Chloe's iPad. I held the screen up just far enough for my mother to see the group chat. "I'm going to trip the clumsy idiot. Mom says she'll back me up." My mother's eyes darted across the text. For the first time in my life, I saw her lose her composure. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She just looked at the guests to see if anyone else was looking. "That was a joke, Elena," she whispered, her voice cracking. "A light-hearted joke to ease the tension of the day. You're being incredibly sensitive." "It wasn't a joke when I hit the floor," I said. "And it wasn't a joke when you said your line right on cue. You didn't even ask if I was hurt. You just worried about the attention I was stealing." Chloe walked over, her face blotchy and red. She saw the phone in my hand and stopped. The defiance she'd had 5 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a sharp, jagged panic. Without my money, she didn't have a party. Without the party, she didn't have the status she craved. "Give me the card," Chloe demanded, her hand out. "I'll run it myself. You're clearly having a breakdown. We'll talk about your hurt feelings later, but right now you are going to pay Marcus so my guests can eat." "The card is in my purse," I said, pointing to where it sat on the sideboard. "But the balance is 0. You can swipe it 100 times, Chloe. It won't change the fact that I took my life back 5 minutes ago." Marcus stepped back into the frame. "Time's up. I haven't seen a payment. We're clearing the room." That was the shift. It wasn't just possible anymore, it was happening. I watched the lead server walk to the artisanal oyster bar, the centerpiece Chloe had insisted on. He began to lift the large, galvanized trays of ice. The guests who had been hovering near the food scrambled back, their faces a mix of confusion and mounting gossip. "Wait!" my mother shouted, turning to the room. "There's just a minor technical glitch with the bank's server. Everything is fine. Please stay in the sunroom." But no one was looking at the sunroom. They were looking at the servers who were now folding up the white linens. They were looking at the macarons being boxed back into cardboard crates. The world of beauty my mother had promised was being dismantled in real time. My father finally walked over, his face gray. "Ellie, please, I'll pay you back. I'll sign a note. Anything. Just don't do this to your mother in front of these people. Think of our reputation." "You don't have a reputation, Dad," I said, and the words felt like ice. "You have my savings, and I'm not lending it out anymore." I looked at my sister. She was leaning against the wall, clutching her stomach, looking at the photographer who was still awkwardly standing there with his camera. "Is this what you wanted?" Chloe screamed at me. "To ruin everything, to make me look like a failure." "No," I said. "I just wanted to see what happened when I stopped carrying you. Now I know." The leverage was total. I had the truth, I had the money, and for the first time I had the exit. I wasn't the one who had to explain why the party had died. I wasn't the one who had to explain the lies. I picked up my purse. I looked at the room one last time, the silk runner I'd taped, the ribbons I'd tied, the family that had never really seen me. I turned toward the front door. "Elena. If you walk out that door, don't you dare come back," my mother shrieked. I didn't even turn around. "That's the plan, Mom," I said. I walked out. I didn't drive away, not yet. I pulled my car into a visitor's spot 3 houses down where I had a clear view of my parents' driveway. My hands were gripped tight on the steering wheel and I could feel the dampness of the punch still soaking into my jeans. I looked at the dashboard clock. 2:10 p.m. This was the countdown. Inside that house, the technical glitch excuse was currently dying a slow, painful death. Marcus wouldn't wait forever. In 10 minutes, the logistics of the event would reach the point of no return. I reached for my phone and made my first move, the logistical one. I called the bank. I didn't just move the money, I reported my debit card as lost. I wanted that specific card number, the one on file with the caterer, to be stone cold dead. No one was going to accidentally find a way to run it again if I had a moment of weakness. Card deactivated, the automated voice said. That was the safety. Then came the emotional move. I opened my personal email and looked at the draft I'd written months ago but never had the courage to send. It was a formal resignation from the family business, not a job, but the role of the fixer. I attached the screenshots of Chloe's group chat to the email and addressed it to my father, my mother, and Chloe. I didn't hit send yet. I held my thumb over the button, watching the house. A guest, a woman in a bright yellow fascinator, walked out the front door. She looked around, confused, and then started power walking toward her SUV. 2 more followed. They weren't saying goodbye. They were fleeing. The risk move was next. I knew that by staying in the car, I was risking a physical confrontation if my father came looking for me. I knew that by cutting the funds, I was essentially lighting my relationship with my mother on fire. There would be no later where we laughed about this. I saw the catering van's back doors swing open. 2 servers started hauling out the silver warming racks. They were loading the van. Inside the house, the world of beauty was being packed into plastic crates. My phone started vibrating. Mom. I declined it. It buzzed again. Dad, I declined it. Then a text from Chloe, ELENA, pick up. Marcus is taking the cake, the actual cake. Mom is having a heart attack. If you don't fix this now, I will never let you see your niece. I mean it. I looked at the screen. The threat didn't hurt the way she thought it would. It just felt like one more bill she was trying to send me. I hit send on the email. I watched as the photographer walked out of the house. He didn't have his camera out anymore. He was shaking his head, checking his watch, and heading for his car. He looked like a man who knew he wasn't getting his final check. The countdown was at 0. The catering van's engine turned over, a low rumble that I could hear even from 3 houses away. I put my car in gear. I wasn't waiting for the final explosion. I had seen enough to know the fuse was gone. I drove past the house slowly. Through the large front window, I could see my mother. She was standing in the center of the living room, her arms crossed, her head tilted back as she shouted at my father. He was slumped on the sofa I had moved for them, his head in his hands. The social cost was mounting. The neighbors were watching. The guests were leaving. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one standing in the middle of the mess with a broom. I turned the corner and headed toward the highway. I didn't have a plan for Monday morning at the office. I didn't know where I was going to stay tonight, since I didn't want to be at my apartment if they showed up there. All I knew was that the weight in my chest, the one I'd carried since I was a little girl, was gone. I reached the threshold of the highway and accelerated. I was 32 years old, unemployed, and familyless. I had never felt more like myself. The walk from my car to the front door of the house felt like crossing a border. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was a witness. Inside, the silence was jagged. It wasn't the peaceful quiet I'd been dreaming of. It was the sound of a vacuum. The catering staff had moved with lethal efficiency. The artisanal oyster bar was gone, nothing left but a few melting ice cubes on the hardwood. The tiered dessert table was a bare skeleton of silver-plated wire. My mother was standing in the center of the living room. Her hair, which she'd spent 2 hours having styled into perfect, grandmother-to-be, waves, was starting to fray. She was holding a single, lonely macaron she must have snatched before the boxes were taped shut. "They took the chairs, Gerald," she whispered. Her voice was thin, reedy. "They actually took the chairs." My father didn't look up from the sofa. He was staring at the spot where the gift table had been. "They were rentals, Martha. We didn't pay the balance. The man said the contract was void." "But the Sanborns," she gasped, her eyes darting to the window. They saw the van being loaded. They saw the trays going out. "Everyone saw," I said. They both jumped. My mother turned, her face twisting into something sharp and ugly the moment she realized it was me. "You," she hissed. She dropped the macaron. It crunched under her heel. "You have the audacity to come back here after what you did. You destroyed your sister's life today. You humiliated us in front of everyone who matters." "I didn't do anything but stop paying for the lie, Mom," I said. I walked further into the room. I didn't take my coat off. I didn't want to stay. The humiliation was already there. I just let the lights come on so you could see it. "You cost me my reputation," she screamed, lunging toward me. My father stood up and caught her by the elbows, pulling her back. 30 years of building a name in this town, and you turned us into a joke in 45 minutes. "The name was built on my bonus checks," I said. "It was built on my extra money. If your reputation can't survive a declined credit card, it wasn't a reputation. It was an illusion." The front door opened. Chloe walked in from the backyard. She had tried to wash the punch out of her dress, but the silk was ruined, puckered, and stained a dull, bruised purple. She looked at me, and for a second I saw something in her eyes that wasn't rage. It was calculation. She was already looking for the next leverage point. "Elena," Chloe said, her voice dropping into a low, shaky vibrato. "I'm having contractions, sharp ones, the stress. The doctor said I had to stay calm. If something happens to this baby, it's on your hands. Are you happy now? Is this the revenge you wanted?" In the old days, I would have panicked. I would have been on my knees, apologizing, reaching for my phone to call her doctor, offering to pay for a private suite. I would have been the clumsy idiot trying to make amends for a crime I didn't commit. I just looked at her stomach, then back at her face. "You aren't having contractions, Chloe," I said. "You're having a tantrum. You've been using that baby as a shield since the moment you saw the stick turn blue. But shields only work if the person on the other side is willing to stop swinging. I'm not swinging, I'm just done." "How can you be so cold?" my mother sobbed, sinking into the sofa next to my father. "We are your family. We are your blood." "Blood is just biology, Mom," I said. "Family is supposed to be a place where you're safe. I wasn't safe here. I was a resource." I pulled my phone out. I didn't show them the banking app this time. I opened the email I'd sent, the one with the screenshots of the baby shower besties chat. "I sent this to the 3 of you," I said. "But I also Aunt Linda and Mrs. Sanborn, and I sent a copy to the photographer." The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the empty kitchen. My mother's face went white. You did what?" "Aunt Linda called me while I was in the car," I said. "She was the one who told me you'd been telling everyone I was unstable and erratic to explain why I was the only one working. She didn't like the look on Chloe's face when I fell. She's been suspicious for a long time." "You're lying," Chloe whispered, but her hands were shaking. "She's not lying," my father said. He looked at the floor. "Linda called me 10 minutes ago. She said she's staying at a hotel tonight. She said she doesn't want to be associated with people who treat their own like that." He looked up at me. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, not an apology but a recognition. He knew the peace was gone forever. He knew he was finally going to have to live in the house he'd let them build. "You've ruined us," my mother whispered. She looked at the bare walls, the empty floor where the beautiful furniture had been rearranged into a mess. "We have nothing." "You have exactly what you paid for," I said. I turned to Chloe. The caterer didn't take the cake, by the way. He told me he left it in the kitchen. He said it wasn't worth the effort to box it back up. It's sitting on the counter. You should go eat it. You paid for it with my career. Chloe didn't move. She just stared at me, her mouth hanging open. The golden child was finally standing in the dark, and she didn't know how to turn the lights on. I walked toward the door. Elena. My mother called out. It wasn't a scream this time, it was a plea. What are we supposed to do? The mortgage, the car payments, we were counting on that bonus check. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I didn't turn around. I don't know, Mom, I said. Maybe you could ask the baby shower besties. I'm sure they have plenty of jokes that can cover the overhead. I stepped out onto the porch. The sun was starting to set, casting long, orange shadows across the lawn. The neighborhood was quiet again. The vans were gone. The guests were gone. I walked down the 3 steps, the same steps where I was supposed to be humiliated, and I didn't stumble. My feet felt heavy but solid. I got into my car and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment looking at the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. It looked like just a building. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, my boss. Elena, I got your email. I saw the timestamps on those files you uploaded at 3 a.m. I didn't realize you were working through the night while dealing with all that. Monday morning is still happening, but it's not a disciplinary hearing. It's a debrief. Take the weekend. Turn your phone off. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. The reversal was complete. The liars had lost their audience. The bank was closed. And for the first time in 32 years, the only person I had to take care of was the woman sitting in the driver's seat. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, steady crumbling of the life they had built on my back. On Monday morning, I walked into Sarah's office. I didn't have a speech prepared. I just had my badge and the truth. We talked for 2 hours, not about my family, but about the workload I'd been carrying and the emergencies that had been bleeding into my productivity. Sarah didn't fire me. She put me on a 2-week paid sabbatical and told me that when I came back, we were hiring a junior analyst to take the overflow. You're a high performer, Elena, she said, looking at me over her glasses. But high performers eventually snap if they're the only ones holding the line. Go get some sleep. I did. I slept for 12 hours straight in a hotel room downtown, my phone turned off and tucked inside the bedside drawer. When I finally turned it back on, the digital world was on fire. I had 47 unread texts from my mother, ranging from "please answer," "we're desperate," to "you are a monster," who abandoned her sister in her hour of need. There were 0 from my father, but it was the other messages that mattered. Aunt Linda had sent a long, thoughtful text. Elena, I'm so sorry we didn't see it sooner. We knew things were tense, but we had no idea you were being used like that. I've spoken to the rest of the family. We're giving your mother some space to think about her choices. You are always welcome at my table. No strings attached. 3 of Chloe's bridesmaids had also messaged me. They weren't checking on her. They were apologizing for the group chat. One of them, Jen, admitted that Chloe had been bragging for weeks about how much money she was tricking me into spending. They'd all stepped back. The baby shower besties group chat was deleted by Tuesday morning. Chloe's baby was born 3 weeks later. I found out through a Facebook post from a distant cousin. I didn't visit. I didn't send a gift. I didn't even like the photo. I looked at the image of the baby, a beautiful, innocent girl, and I felt a pang of sadness, not for myself, but for her. She was entering a house where love was a currency and attention was a weapon. I hoped that one day she'd be the one to walk out the front door. My parents had to downsize. Without my contributions and the bonus checks they'd treated as their own, they couldn't keep up the mortgage on the big house. They moved into a 2-bedroom condo on the edge of town. My father finally got a part-time job as a consultant, and my mother stopped hosting the garden club. The reputation she'd been so terrified of losing was gone, replaced by a quiet, local understanding that the perfect family had some very ugly cracks. I see them occasionally at larger family events, like funerals or weddings I can't avoid. We don't speak. My mother looks through me as if I'm a stranger who once stole something from her. My father just nods, his eyes full of a weary, resigned kind of regret. I'm okay with that. I bought my house 6 months ago. It's a small, mid-century bungalow with a big garden and a sunroom that I didn't have to move a single piece of furniture into for anyone else. Every tile, every coat of paint, and every piece of silverware was paid for by me, for me. Last Sunday, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee. The neighborhood was quiet. There were no clipboards, no floral centerpieces to fix, and no one demanding to know why the clumsy idiot hadn't finished the ribbons. I looked at my bank balance on my phone. It wasn't about the number. It was about the fact that the money stayed where I put it. I thought about that afternoon at the top of the 3 stairs. I thought about the moment I hit the floor and the look on my sister's face. I used to think that was the moment everything broke. Now I know it was the moment I finally landed on solid ground. Self-respect is the quietest form of revenge. You don't have to shout. You don't have to win the argument. You just have to stop setting yourself on fire to keep people warm who only want to watch the flames. I'm Alina. I'm 33 years old. And for the first time in my life, I'm not the family bank. I'm just a woman drinking coffee in a house that belongs to her.